I have never heard the choir sing so beautifully. Thank you. It was just beautiful. I remember many years ago, it was Sunday morning and I was supposed to give the service here at the retreat. And I suddenly got a kidney stone attack. Kidney stones can be extremely painful. My body was shaking like a leaf. And people were trying to get me to go to town to the hospital. I said I was just in too much pain to risk those winding roads. And I never pray for myself, but finally about 11:15, the service was to begin at 11, I said, Divine Mother, if you want me to give the service, you're just going to have to heal me. And you know, it's amazing. The pain just vanished like that. Then it was replaced with so much joy that I could hardly speak anyway. And that's how I feel today. So much bliss, it's difficult to speak. And those songs, especially the first two, are moving. Well, the subject we have today is a very important one. I think it's very important that we understand that art is not the idea, art for art's sake, is a delusion. Everything, it's been said, and I've mentioned this in my book. If you've not seen it, this is it. It's the one book I've ever written that I can't prevent myself from reading again and again. It's just so full of, it answers so many questions, so many unasked questions, and it says so many things that help you to understand what an absolutely wonderful universe we live in if we can just adjust. If we can adjust to what God wants us to enjoy. But we don't. We want it to be our way, and that's why we suffer. That beautiful piece that they played last night, Life is the Quest for Joy. Really, if I were to give you the full title, it would be Life, in spite of trials, disappointments, and suffering, is a quest for joy. That is what we are all looking for. We want joy. We don't know where to find it, and we seek it in the wrong ways. But all life has to be understood as that quest, and the arts have to be understood that way too. But we're living in an age where people, fortunately, they're beginning to come out of it. Science is beginning to come out of it. But basically the belief of science is that everything is material. Consciousness is produced by the brain. The idea that a computer will someday be sophisticated enough to be conscious. They're even talking of someday having computers' rights. Robots' rights. It's almost ridiculous. I heard another ridiculous one. Classes that they're giving in the cities, avatar training. We laugh that we may not weep. But the thing is that all you have to do is look at the simplest form of visible life you can observe with the naked eye, the earthworm. Try to prick an earthworm with a pin and it'll squirm away. It's conscious, it's obviously conscious. There couldn't be anything simpler than the mechanism of of an earthworm. But it is conscious and it is self-conscious. And this is the reality of our existence. We begin with consciousness. Descartes' dictum, I think, therefore I am, is perfectly wrong. I'm conscious of existing and therefore I'm able to think. That's the way he should have put it. You can't, the highest form of meditation is not thinking at all. Saint Teresa gave as the fourth stage of prayer a stage when the mind cannot think anymore. It's held gripped in ecstasy. This idea that we think our way to solutions also is a great mistake. We must understand that the aspect of art is extremely important in human affairs for one basic reason. We all have come to the point, if we come to it at all, of realizing that consciousness is a reality. But that's not enough. There is also bliss. There is also self-consciousness. And both of these are inherent in the very bedrock of material universe, what to speak of the infinite universe. Everything is consciousness, everything is bliss, everything is self-conscious. Now, how do I justify that? Well, without feeling, without some great reservoir of feeling, how could there be any feelings? How could there be any emotions? When we speak of the compassion of Buddha, when we speak of the compassion of Jesus Christ, where did that feeling come from? From a great reservoir of nothingness? Emotions themselves are merely confused or excited feeling, but feeling is a part of consciousness. In fact, I will go so far as to suspect and to voice my suspicion publicly that I suspect that without feeling we wouldn't even be conscious. Reason can think things through. You can have computers that will reason beautifully. And yet you can't say they're conscious. You couldn't sit down to a conversation with them. Or maybe you could. But you know damn well they aren't conscious. The reality has to be something more. But we feel. This is why feeling and reason both are needed. You can't have one without the other. Feeling without reason becomes undisciplined. Master said that devotion must be kept in a state of reason, otherwise it becomes fanatical. We must guide our feeling by reason. Some people say that they want to be channels. They don't understand that they've got to be sensible channels. They don't understand that they've got to understand what they're channeling. I couldn't tell you how many people there are on Mars. I'm told there aren't. I couldn't tell you that either. I can only give you inspiration according to what I know. My inspiration comes through that knowledge. And no doubt a master could sort of tune in and tell you, no, there aren't people on Mars, or there are people on Mars, in spite of what science says. But ordinary human inspiration has to deal with what it knows. You know, when I was young, I was 18 years old, and I had a nice voice, and so I studied singing, thinking that I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and I thought it might be fun to try singing. People were saying there's money in your voice and so on, and I one tries. Well, I took singing lessons. It was, first of all, I have to say that my teacher was a very good teacher. After several months, first of all, she wouldn't let me sing on my own. She would have me imitate her placement. Now, she had a soprano voice. I did not. So placing it, when I learned to sing by copying her song, her tone of voice and her placement, it was my voice. This is where people go wrong in thinking they don't need a guru. You don't become like the guru. You begin to develop his spiritual magnetism, and then you develop your own self. Each saint is unique. Each saint is different from all others. And so with that, I remember her in the middle of one song after about 4 months. She stopped me. She said, "That note, that's the way they should all sound." She was very careful. I remember I sang for the best voice teacher in Mexico City that next summer. And the first thing she said was, "Never change your teacher." But I had to change my teacher. In fact, I had to give up my teacher and all teaching in that way. Because my last lesson, she said, she was an old woman, she was 75 years old. And she said, "I'm only living for one thing, and that's to see you become a great singer." She said, "It isn't your voice only. Many people have good voices, but you have understanding." And I thought, what shall I do if I become a great singer? What is there to sing? And I went down the roster of some of these songs that I'd had to learn. "O cessate di piagarmi, o lasciatemi morir." Essentially, if you want to put it in modern jargon, what it means is stop bugging me and let me die. I'm supposed to sing this? Spend my life telling people this? Then there was a German one. Ich grolle nicht, und wenn das Herz auch bricht, I won't complain, but even when my heart's breaking, I'm not going to complain. And I thought, oh, wait a minute here. I mean, it's all very honorable and noble and proper to say I won't complain, but when you start listing all the reasons you have for complaint, you understand that what he's really saying is I am complaining. And so why bother? And then there was that beautiful song of Schubert's that Du holde Kunst, wien wie viel grauen Stunden. Oh, you wonderful art, and how many gray hours I have been inspired by the beauty of music. It's called To Music. Lovely, except music is not a god. Music depends on our consciousness. Ultimately, all the arts have to be based on truth and have to be based on human nature. You know, I had another interesting experience, and that was, first of all, in learning Schubert songs, there were two of them of Shakespeare that were nice songs, and they're also very famous songs. One was, Who is Sylvia? What is she? That all our swains commend her. It's a classical song with great dignity. And what does the word swain mean? Sort of a country bumpkin. So what are you going to make a classical song out of a country bumpkin? I mean, yes, swains perhaps are a little better than bumpkins, but they're still, and they're not country pumpkins either. they're ordinary country folk. And a song like that should be different. Besides which, you see, Schubert was writing it, maybe in German it's different, but in English, what is not a beautiful sound? Who is Sylvia? What is she? It just didn't work. When you say what, you want to pass by apologetically and rush to the next word. And so when I wrote, there was a time in 1965, I was writing music. And it's not so easy to write lyrics that mean something, that are singable, that fit the music, the words, I mean, to the music, that fit the music, that uplift, that say something intelligent, and so on. It takes quite a bit of work. And yet the music came so quickly that once I got frustrated, and I thought, I've always loved Shakespeare, let me just take some of his songs. So I took this one, and I apologized, took my hat off to Schubert, said, please forgive me. However, this to me was a song that you sing, it's a sort of a country song. It's a song of it's not a classical thing to be sung from a platform. It's to be sung in the meadows. In fact, when I wrote a string quartet on it, I had the third movement is Who is Sylvia? It's the Shakespeare quartet using some of these melodies. And I'd love for you all to learn to play that one. I don't know if you can, but anyway, it begins with sort of a country fair in melody. And then gradually it goes from the fair to some group of people sitting under a tree, and there's a young man with a guitar singing this song. And the melody I have is a beautiful melody too, with apologies to Schubert, but it fits the words better. Who is Sylvia? What is she? That all our swains commend her. Holy, fair, and wise is she. That all our the heaven such grace did lend her, that she might admired be, that she might admired be. It's a lovely melody, but it fits the words and it fits the mood better. There was another one that Schubert wrote, and it too was one I had to learn. It was a beautiful song, but again, I don't think he knew English, because it was that one, Hark, hark, the lark, what? At
heaven's gate sings.
What?
At heaven's gate sings.
Hark, hark, the lark at heaven's gate sings. Well, that's not iambic pentameter, although it scans that way. Hark, hark, the lark at heaven's gate sings, but you're not singing it that way. It's hark, hark, the lark at heaven's gate sings, isn't it? But Schubert did it iambic pentameter. Hark, hark, the lark at heaven's gate sings. It's a lovely melody, but it doesn't fit the words. So I changed that, and I did hark, hark, the lark at heaven's gate sings, and Phoebus begins arise, his steeds to water at those springs on chaliced flowers that lies. And winking merry buds begin to ope their golden eyes. With everything that pretty is, my lady sweet, arise, arise, arise. It fits the words. So you see that you have to make art suitable. And Schubert wrote beautiful music, but not knowing English perhaps, he didn't make that one suitable to Shakespeare, or to the scene in the play, or to any of those things. He made another sort of operatic tenor kind of song. Well, in music, in art, we have to take two things into account. And this modern art has gotten away from. It's just painful to see the kind of art that passes for art nowadays. With Picasso, I mean, what does that say? Schizophrenia, doesn't it? At least the man had a good sense of humor. Somebody showed him a Picasso and he said, "Oh, that's a fake Picasso." He said, "But it's got your signature." He said, "I can paint a fake Picasso as well as anyone else." And another one, he showed this beautiful work of art that everybody was saying, "Oh, wonderful, wonderful." Who did it? He said, "Well, in fact, my monkey painted it." So he had a sense of humor, but I have to say I cannot stand his art because it doesn't say anything. Art should be human, and that is above all to say that it should be true to human values. Now, you want your art to be powerful, don't you? And yet, you'll notice that it's a lot easier to be powerful if you voice emotion than if you voice calmness. It's sort of like a hose. If you pinch the hose, you can get more of a squirt from it. And so people think that if they're going to be shouting, look at the movies of Bollywood. Look at the sitcom comedies, which I never look at, but I've been hearing about, on television in the West. It's just awful. People think that they're expressing the deep feeling by emotion. Truthfully, the more emotional you are, the less real deep feeling there is. There's nothing to compare with the depth of love of a great master. I remember I was with Master. I've had this laser thing on your eyes that makes it possible for me to see your expressions now, so watch out. But I couldn't before. And I was leaving Master's presence, just one memory out of many. And I turned at the door to say goodbye, and he looked at me. There was so much love pouring out of his eyes that I began weeping. That kind of power doesn't come from emotion. That comes from a reservoir of great strength. If you want power in your art, don't squeeze your heart. Don't squeeze it by becoming angry or self-righteous or all those things that make people shout at each other. I wanted the play you're going to see tonight. It's I used to want to be a playwright. This was my dream. And I had to say that I did not know truth, and so I was not going to impose my ignorance on anybody. And I left writing. But this play was something I wrote when I was 15, and it did have something in it. And I rewrote it, so I can't say that what you're going to see tonight is what I did when I was 15, but basically it was. It was written during the World War, Second World War. And I was thinking that, what is there in human nature that makes people fight? And I was thinking if only we could have a kind of a peace treaty that would really bring people peace, because everybody wants peace. The trouble is that the leaders often don't want it. They want power, they want dominion, they want aggression. And in this play, it's the end of a war, just as the play will be tonight. And the leader of these united clans that were able to beat down the one clan that invaded them all, and this leader afterwards, this general, this was set in caveman days, and he decided that we must have a peace treaty so that nobody will ever go to war again. And everybody applauds and all the lords say, this is great. However, and then you come to the disaster. How each one, praising the peace treaty, begins to pull it apart, saying, yes, but on the other hand, we have to be practical. Yes, but on the other hand, we have to get our back. We've been invaded, we have to get our own back, and so on. They finally completely dismantle the peace treaty. And at the end, this general is saying that, is this the way God wants it? Does God want us to suffer? Does God want us to go through all this? And then he says, well, it must be so. And the play ends with guns, first of all shouts and screams and so on, then guns, then cannons, and finally a big bomb, and then silence. This was my take on things when I was 15. Thank God I've changed my mind. And I see more hope today, but not that much hope. I think we're still headed for, I seriously think we're headed for disaster, but not permanent disaster. That's the difference. And you'll see that in this play, it shows how people want something better. And if we could honor that desire of human nature to be at peace, Master said that after the next great war, there will be peace for 300 years. People will be so fed up with destroying each other. But you can't say with wishful thinking that it's all going to be all right, and maybe if we pray hard enough, God will prevent us from butchering each other. How can He do it when we want to butcher each other? How can you do it when there's so much violence and so much hatred? And so I think that art should reflect human values, but there is a need for those kinds of artistic expression that express, well, social needs, for example. Some of the plays of and some of the books and so on that have been influential in changing society, these are important. But if you want real art, the kind of art that will live, then you've got to be true to human nature. And you've got to go beyond these little two-dimensional people that those kinds of novels depict. You've got to understand that what you're doing is depicting people or human consciousness in one way or another, and then you have to ask yourself the question, is this a good message? And is it true to human life? And is it something everybody can benefit from? And I think ultimately art should be, its purpose should be to uplift us. And why? Well, the very purpose of life is to find what we're all looking for. And art that can do that, I was surprised when Master wrote that artists, composers, writers, and so on, these in the caste system are Vaishyas. I was surprised at that, and yet most of the art is really only directed toward helping you emotionally, or not necessarily helping you expressing emotions. But on the other hand, Master was a writer, Vedavyasa was a writer, and a beautiful writer. It doesn't mean necessarily that. Usually people perform art not to uplift, but just to sort of share with others a skill that they have. And as I had to face this thought when my teacher wanted me to become a famous singer, I thought, what is there to sing? What would the final purpose of my becoming a singer be? To show people that I have a beautiful voice and that I have insight into interpreting songs. What is that but ego? What are we here to do? And this is we have to probe more and more deeply if you want to come to a conference of this nature, where we talk not only of art, but what art can do to uplift you. All art carries a hidden message. Everything people do carries a message. The way they walk tells you who they are. The tone of their voice tells you who they are. You can see from the way they move, from their interests, everything. You betray yourself or declare yourself in everything. Your tone of voice is a very important thing to keep in mind. Always try to develop, and this is something that Vivekananda, I should say, used to say, that one of the first things that people develop when they take up yoga is a sweet voice. Well, it's so, because when your heart becomes purified automatically, as Jesus Christ said, of the fullness of the heart the mouth speaketh. The vibrations of the heart are what tell a person who and what you are. Be sensitive to these things. I remember a man told me once, I work on Montgomery Street, and you know what that means. I didn't have to see his face to sit and hear it in his voice. The ego, well, I'm a stockbroker, I'm wealthy, and you can hear it. Try to express. When you express, art is just one means of self-expression. We need to become artists as human beings too, to learn kindness. Yes, you can get people to do what you want if you shout at them loudly enough. There was this, I was about to tell you the story of this man. He's a movie director in India. And I would love to get this movie that you're going to see tonight made into a movie. And I think India, it could be more cheaply made than Hollywood. But this man had me come, he gave me free tickets, me and Nirman Damadas and a few others, to a show that he was doing. It was absolutely appalling. He had these people shouting. Well, first of all, why be angry about anything? But, okay, if you want to be angry, there are a lot of ways to express anger. From a sneer to contempt to, so many ways. All they could think of to do was shout more loudly, and then point more loudly and more angrily and more. I just wanted to go home. In fact, I had to tell him, I'm sorry, this is not my play. We can't do it. And so, but so much art is that. It's not art, it's bombast. And you look at the sculpture today, they think they're being clever by giving you a bunch of cogs and wheels. Art should say something, and it should say something human. Why is it that some of those sculptors and artists of the Renaissance had something to say, and it's still beautiful? There's Sean and Brooke gave me a big book. It's about that thick, and I don't have the strength to hold it even. And it's of Leonardo da Vinci. He was such a great artist. There was such refinement. Now, why don't you see that kind of thing now? I'll tell you why. In those days, they had faith. They believed in what they were doing, and I don't think today people believe in what they're doing. They're doing trivia. The novels you read, the paintings you see, the sculptures, my God, and the music you listen to. I tell you, the only music that really has meaning that I know of today is popular music, because it's very easy to relate to and to feel things like human love. And when you get a song like Night and Day, You Are the One, Only You Beneath the Moon and Under the Sun, what a beautiful melody, because he felt it. But they don't feel it. They think they're being clever by writing melodies and songs. You know, your melodies expresses aspiration. And if you have no aspiration, how are you going to give people a melody? You aren't. You have to understand that everything that art does expresses something human and philosophical too. First of all, human, but then you have to ask yourself, is this good human in the sense that will it lift me, or will it keep me wandering in delusion, or will it get me confused? There was a song that was banned from the airwaves in the 1920s because too many people listening to it were committing suicide. Gloomy Sunday. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. La 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 la. Well, okay, so you can express suicidal urge. And what have you got from it? Art should be true also. It should give hope. Somebody said to me years ago, well, you can write happy music, you haven't suffered. I said, it's because I've suffered that I have a right to write happy music. I know the way out of suffering. I know how to hang in there until I can find the answers and learn from my suffering. You don't have a right to write about happy things until you've known how to test that happiness. As Master said, your religion is tested in the cold light of day. That was Sister Gaudamata who said it. And it's the truth. So whatever you've done, learn from your life. Don't sit there and brood over it and grieve over it and why have they treated me wrong and stop bugging me and let me die. And I mean, you say it in Italian, it's still the same thing. The thing is, we've got to understand. Only those people really ought to do anything artistic who have learned a few lessons in life. Art should say something. And the absolute nonsense that they present is simply because they don't have any idea where they're heading. And music says it, to my mind, more clearly than any other. Melody says aspiration or lack thereof. Words, well, Cole Porter's in that Night and Day, they were pretty awful after a while. Oh, under the hide of me, my God, what... You have to, if you're going to use words, try to use words that are appropriate to it, too. In this, he was not all that good. But he did have some great melodies. And some of the popular music you hear, if it has an uplifting quality to it, can be beautiful, and you can turn it to God. I remember a song that just inspired me so much when I was young. We played a game of Stay Away, but it cost far more than I can play. I surrender. And I thought of God, how we've played a game of wanting to do it our way. But it's only when we understand and we say, I surrender. It's beautiful. And yet it's just a popular song. But whereas people can make that in human love, if you make it to God, it can be lovely. There's got to be meaning in it. And another thing is, what about the beat? Rock music is absolutely appalling for the reason that it emphasizes ego. I want to... I remember a song that they had, I could write a sonnet about my Easter bonnet. Well, it's a pretty innocent song, wouldn't you say? But then they had ba-bum, ba-bum, I could write a sonnet. It just killed the whole song. This not what the song is all about, for God's sake. You're not writing a sonnet, you're bragging about something or other. You've got to understand that there's got to be fitting meaning, words, rhythm, everything has to be tied together so it expresses what you really are saying. Rhythm, if you have too much emphasis on the first note, on the downbeat, then you're expressing ego. Now, what's wrong with ego? Well, most people would say nothing. So here we come into two things. One is, first of all, nobody likes a braggart. Isn't that true? I mean, if you brag, maybe it's okay. But if somebody else brags, you think there's something wrong with him. And it isn't because you don't like him putting himself up because it puts you down. There's a subtler reason for it. All my life I've tried to analyze, why do people say things the way they do? Why do people think the way they do? Why do they walk the way they do? Everything they do expresses meaning. And then you want to ask yourself, is it valid meaning or false meaning? We don't like bragging because it emphasizes something that we all know is not our true self. There's a deeper knowledge. As Emerson put it, when two people converse, Jove descends. Jove is smiling at Jove. He said, men descend to meet. And somehow we all know that we are more than we think we are. We're much more than this little body. And nobody, I don't think it's possible for any human being really to say, and mean it, to say, I am evil. I don't think they could do it. There's always something inside that tries to justify, that tries to feel that I'm really not all that bad. because there's a divine within us. We're not children of Satan, we're children of God. And all of us know that no matter how many mistakes we make, there's some way of justifying it. And some people will find foolish ways. In fact, you might say that most people find foolish ways. Well, I admit I smoke, but at least I don't drink. And the person he's talking to will say, well, yeah, I drink a little, but at least I don't smoke. And so they all find some way to justify themselves. But we all know that there's something wrong with too much pride, too much pushing of oneself. Anybody who does it too much, we laugh at him, don't we? At least behind his back. I don't, perhaps, but that's the norm. No, I really don't, because I've seen that I can... one of the things that brought me onto the path was the stark realization that there isn't a single delusion anybody has ever gotten into, that just a little bit of twist in my own mind I couldn't have done myself. I mentioned this last Sunday, that when I was 9, I had severe colitis, and I had delirium, and my dad was reading Huckleberry Finn, and Huckleberry Finn's father was a drunk. And in my delirium, I was saying, I don't want to be a drunkard, I don't want to be a drunkard. And I realize now, looking back, what I was really saying is, I don't want delusion, because it came to me so increasingly, poignantly, how easy it would be to be anything that any human being is. Every human being is expressing your own potential. You have the potential to be the worst sinner or the greatest saint. And I made up my mind a long time ago, I don't want to be those things. I think I've been them all. And I think they didn't give me what I wanted. And that's why I've been so desperate to know what I did want and how to find it. God is the only answer. But we must understand these things more and more deeply. Therefore, I say that a good artist, a true artist, should also be a philosopher. A true artist should try to probe human nature, not just to show it in its, quote, stark reality, because human nature, at the bottom of it, is not stark. Everybody is so close to God. Just a little change of thought, and they could be saints. It's the truth. If anybody can become a saint, then you can become a saint. Jesus Christ and Buddha and Krishna and Yogananda and Lahiri Mahasaya and all of them, they did not come into this world to show us how great they were. They came to show us how great we can become. In our potential, we have that potential. And so they came to give us hope. If it weren't for them, who would ever think of rising? This world is it's a trap. It seems so real, and yet it's not real. It's all a dream. But let's dream good dreams. And the arts, we need feeling. We must understand that without feeling, we're just mechanics. We're mechanisms. Feeling, this is why women who emphasize feeling more than men are absolutely needed. You cannot say that women are less than men. On the other hand, you cannot say that men are less than women, because they're two sides of the same coin. Both are needed. Each balances the other. Feeling has to be reasoned also. I've heard people say that I'm a channel. What are you being a channel for? I remember I used to tell people I never prepare a talk. And so some of our people, this was back in the 70s, were not preparing their talks. What they talked was absolute garbage. You have to think things through. You have to live. If you're going to channel, you've got to channel something. And just thinking that I'm going to be here and be a channel, I tried that one too. It was in the middle of a lecture of a sermon at Hollywood Church back in 1955. And I remember that Master had said that you should let God talk through you, be a channel for God. So I thought, well, then let me just shut up and let him talk. So I stood there. And in the middle of a talk with 100 people waiting for you to say the next sentence, and you just stand there, and a minute passes, people begin to perspire. I think you've lost it. I stood there for, so help me, 2 minutes just waiting calmly for God to say something. And then finally I realized, well, He's not going to speak. I'm going to have to do something about this. It isn't that I was so out of tune that he wouldn't speak through me. It's that Master said, pray this way to God. I will reason, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. You have to do it, and you've got to be intelligent. You just can't be pouring out. I remember, I don't know if any of you have read Nijinsky's diary. Nijinsky was the greatest dancer of his time, a Russian. And he went mad in the end, but for a time he was sort of, in this diary, he was showing how he would let God sort of inspire him to go down this path and that path and do this and do that, but it was all subconscious. Being a channel doesn't mean so hard, God, tell me what you want. Hey, you've got to use your brains. You have to use your intelligence. There are channels and channels, let's put it that way. And not all of them are good channels. There was a terrible experience that I've mentioned also in this new book of mine. An American soldier in Tibet just in the 30s. He somehow was fascinated by the black magicians of Tibet. And they have black magicians there. I think that's why they've fallen, although they were a great culture too. Are a great culture. But he persuaded a black magician to let him come to a seance. And the black magician said, don't let anybody know you aren't one of us or you'll be killed. So he hooded himself, they all hooded themselves, they all came to this ground, and some head black magician sat on a rock with a human thigh bone that was hollowed out, and he blew this trumpet, and then they all began in a circle chanting, Yamantaka, Yamantaka, Yamantaka. Gradually, with the power of their united concentration, these demons began to appear actually physically before their eyes. And he said it was horrible. He could see who was the demon of lust, who was the demon of avarice, who was the demon of anger. They all expressed it in grotesque caricature. And then gradually the god Yama himself came as the great power of evil. And at this point they felt him trying to take over their consciousness, and they all worked together. He was just as much gripped in that thought as all of them were, and driving this thing away. And finally they got up, and they'd drawn some power from that evil. They didn't know they also came under the control of that evil. People who practice black magic are doing very terrible things to themselves. They're becoming channels for evil, and you can do that. You can make anything you do, you can be a channel for. If you want to be a good businessman, mix with good businessmen. Mix with people who are successful in business. You will develop their magnetism. Thoughts are universally rooted, not individually rooted. Every thought you think thoughts are moving like influences through the universe. And whatever thought you think will enhance that power and make you either creative or not creative, either good or bad. Satan and God are on two sides of a fence, and it depends on which way you turn, this way or that. But it's so easy to go wrong. And the arts in modern times, they are satanic. I will not mince words. There is much that is satanic in modern art because they find it so easy to draw on negative and harmful inspiration. We must look for God. We must look for uplifting inspirations. And those aren't so easy. When I came to the point of realizing that my duty as an artist was to try to channel that, I also understood I didn't know that, so how could I channel it? And so I quit everything and decided I would seek God, and I met Master. It was many years before I took up writing again. But now I feel that when I do write or compose, I'm not just channeling any old thing that comes along. I feel that it's something high. I will never call myself a channel, as I would never call myself a playwright, as I would never call myself a teacher. I do these things just as a human being. This is how the artist should be too. He's a human being trying to express human values in ways that will uplift people's feelings. And you can do anything you like with people's feelings. Try to uplift them. Why not? I want to read you 2 passages from this book, Revelations of Christ. The issue of consciousness, I've said this before, is not limited merely to that abstraction, consciousness itself. It includes feeling also. Indeed, our feelings are more important to most of us than is our ability to reason. It is stated that computers will someday be sophisticated enough to be conscious. The humble earthworm, however, is as simple a creature as can easily be observed. And the earthworm is obviously conscious. It is also self-conscious. If it is pricked, it tries to squirm away. Feeling, on the other hand, is intimately connected with the sense of self, whereas rational progressions are more or less mechanical and can be performed by mere computers. Consciousness, obviously, is not a product in any case of brain activity. It precedes the ability to think and reason. Allied to consciousness are 2 things which transcend even the ability to reason: feeling and, as I said, self-awareness. Sanatana Dharma declares that the essence of the Supreme Spirit is Satchidananda, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. As Paramhansa Yogananda translated the term, when the question was posed in that ancient teaching, why did God create the universe? The answer given was, He created it so that He might enjoy Himself through many. What is the essence of that enjoyment, of bliss? It is calm, limitless, unmoving yet ever-thrilling enjoyment of the essence of one's own being. Ever-changing yet essentially changeless. Ever new yet eternally unaffected. Self-existent, uncaused, the supreme source of everything manifested, absolute perfection, a fulfillment of perfect enjoyment beyond imagination of expectancy, as Master wrote in his poem Samadhi. Pure bliss is the fulfillment of selfless love for the infinite self. God created the universe not merely out of His own consciousness, but out of His perfect love for the manifestations of infinite bliss in all things and in all beings. These are thoughts which science would never dare even to contemplate. They reveal the deep need of human beings for more than just the facts, please. We all need religion, if only because it stresses love above the countless scattered bits and pieces of intellectual knowledge. And I want to read further. Making this point again. Logic, too, must be based on something substantial. Of feeling, one can say that it, too, must arise from something. It cannot manifest itself from nothing. As consciousness cannot arise out of unconsciousness, and as something cannot manifest itself out of nothing, so feeling, too, must be included in this syllogism. The fact that feelings exist means they must arise out of some actual reservoir of feeling and not out of a total absence of any feeling at all. If absolute consciousness exists, then feeling, too, must be an aspect of that consciousness. When the waves of feeling which man experiences as ego-motivated emotion become completely stilled, they cannot but sink into a calm reservoir of feeling. They cannot be a product of unfeeling awareness. One question remains. What must be the nature of this vast feeling? Could it even possibly be misery? Absurd. Misery springs from an awareness of lack, and simply could not exist where there was no such awareness. Only absolute fulfillment can provide the sense of completeness that is absolutely satisfying. The simple fact that consciousness itself has to be self-existent and complete in itself can only mean that conscious feeling, too, is absolute, self-existent, and complete in itself. Emotional joy, on the other hand, is not absolute, for it is inevitably accompanied by its opposite, sorrow. Bliss is what remains after every qualification of emotional ups and downs has been removed. Bliss is what we're all looking for. This is the first aspect of it. But then we bring it down to the human level. Art has to express it in a human way. How do we find that bliss? By becoming centered in ourselves. We won't find it here, because if you have to go here, you have to go here. Every outward expression has to have its opposite. You can only find it by neutralizing the waves of feeling in the spine. Therefore, art has to always come back to its own center. This is why symmetry is so important in art. I went to the Joffrey Ballet in New York a few years ago, and some bird had some theory that creativity should always be sort of progressive out of creativity. And so they showed people dancing, and every movement they had, the next movement evolved from that, the next to that, and so on. It was intensely dissatisfying. You want, when the move goes in this way, to go back to the opposite direction. This you saw in the beautiful dancing yesterday in the program last night. And another thing you notice is that most of the movement was the upper part of the body. Why? Why is good art upper and not lower? You can get a lot of good feeling out of lower, but not good feeling. That's the wrong word. Why do dogs wag their tails when they're happy? Because happiness, if it's going upward, leads to God, but when you're in the body, you're in your lower chakras. And so art should go with the higher chakras. And when you have dance, and this is one thing I don't like about some Indian dancing, they do so much stamping with their feet. That's the materialistic side of you, that which brings your body upward. And you know why Indians sort of go like this when they're happy? It's based on this movement. Every expression you make, it has a reflection in your body. When you feel good, you sit up straight. When you feel badly, you slump, your body's heavy, your spine is bent, you look downward. Art should express that which lifts you upward. It's not just a wishful thinking. If it's wishful, you can feel that it's wrong, just like the ich rolle nicht. I won't complain even though I'm suffering like blazes. Well, you're complaining. It isn't what you say, it's more than that. You betray what you're really meaning by your tone of voice. I tell you, I'm very happy. Do I sound it? No, and I'm not if I say that. If I feel happy, I have to express it. There's something in the voice. You know, there's in my singing teacher taught me to sing using my chest as a sounding board, my cheeks, muscles as a sounding board, my head as a sounding board. You can get a good, loud tone that way. You can fill a concert hall. But I came to realize that, in fact, spiritually speaking, we have sounding boards. If you sing from the heart, you produce a heart sound. If you sing from this, I remember I was recording a song, Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Ram Om, a chant. And just as I was reaching the end of it, my mind slipped into the cervical chakra, and I felt my consciousness expanding. I said, let's do it again. And the engineer, the recording engineer, said, what do you mean? It was perfect. But I said, no, it wasn't. I could feel that expansion here when I sang it. And there was a friend of mine who had a little child, baby, 2 years old, and she was scolding this child one time. He used to love to listen to that song. And he looked up at his mother. He said, Sri Ram, Jai Ram. But he had felt the peace in that song, and that peace, he wanted to make his mother peaceful. And when you can bring that sound up to this center here, you can feel it. You can feel it vibrating vocally, but there's also a power that you can feel coming through. We need to, in our arts, express these realities. Anything that will express it outwardly in painting, you will notice that just as visions, if you have a vision that is sort of muddy and unclear, then it will, the painting itself will be muddy, and the vision itself will be, it won't be a true vision, it'll be your subconscious. A true vision has bright brilliance to it, real light. And the same with painting. If you see a painting that is muddy, dark colors and so on, there's something wrong with the artist. Don't carry. I was in a hotel in Holland not very long ago, and the hotel lobby had a painting. It was just so awful. Was it well done? I don't even care to think whether it was well done or not. The consciousness behind it was so base. It was just totally degraded. Okay, you can write something and you can do something degraded, and some people will applaud you. Ask yourself, is this what I want to do with my life? Do I want applause for being dirty, unclean, dark, confused? It's easy to express these qualities. But don't you want to use your art to improve yourself? It can, and it should. Look at Dana's paintings. They're uplifting. This is the kind of art that art should be. It should uplift the mind. And so we should be centered. It should be that which is symmetrical, which brings you to your own center. It should be that which helps to lift you upward, because it's in the higher chakras that you feel bliss. The lower chakras you feel unhappy. People who live more from here, from the heart center up, are always happy. And any time you feel unhappy, you notice that quality going down. Notice the quality of the singing. Is it sort of emotional? Or does it uplift? Does it inspire? When you sing, when you speak, all these things, your whole being resonates with who you are. You as a human being ultimately must be your own greatest masterpiece. The purpose of art is not so much to con other people. It's to become a masterpiece yourself. Do art to become a better person. What other people gain from it is of secondary value. I teach people in my humble way. I hope I can do some good. But I tell you that if it weren't any good for me, I wouldn't do it. It helps me more than anyone else to be a channel for truth. And I can't tell you what a thrill it is to come upon some explanation that can put a truth in such a way that you can say, well, of course! When you can make truth so obvious. But when I was writing, back when I was 20, and I didn't know truth, and I saw the alternative, and I saw that this was the road most people take. They know they don't know truth, and so they try to confuse. They try to make people think that they must be really deep because they really don't know what they're talking about. Like that thing in that beautiful movie, Green Pastures. It's all black people acting. And this Mr. Dishe is a Sunday school teacher, and he's reading a part of the Bible, and this girl in the Bible class says, I think it's just wonderful, Mr. Dishe. I can't understand a single word. And that's what most writers do. They con you into thinking they must be deep because you don't know what they're talking about. Well, I wasn't going to do that. If my ignorance had to be exposed, I'd as soon expose it than hide behind a lot of verbosity and be intoxicated with the exuberance of my own verbosity. Realize that truth is simple. True art, whether it be in music, in writing, in painting, in sculpture, basically it should be simple. And if you can't make it simple, there's something wrong with you. There was a famous American writer whose father was not particularly educated, but he was a man of great common sense. And this writer would read everything he wrote to his father. And the father would say, well, what does that passage mean? And he'd explain, well, it means so-and-so. And the father would say, why didn't you say so then? And he said, my father was my best critic. Try to be so clear in what you're saying that people can weigh whether it's true or whether it's false. Don't leave them confused and thinking, gosh, you must be awfully deep because I don't know what you're talking about. Be absolutely pellucidly clear. And the wonderful thing about these teachings of our Guru is that he's taken these mystical teachings that for centuries have been so vague and unclear, and he's made it so obvious that you can say, well, of course. I've done my best to get you saying, of course, and some people will say, well, gee, I knew all that. Well, if you did, more power to you, but the greater likelihood is that you do it and didn't know that you knew it. People are wiser than they know. They know that there's something wrong when somebody's gloomy all the time and sourpuss all the time. They know that when your energy goes upward, you feel better. They know so many truths of yoga, which as I've explained here, but they haven't made it dynamic to their consciousness. What we must do is try to make the truth dynamic to their consciousness. Don't try to con people with your intelligence. Intelligence doesn't mean a thing anyway. Well, it means something. It makes you a little better than the bears, but it doesn't. Intelligence is only half the battle. Heart quality. When you have a clear heart, you know. There was this beautiful story of Saint Anthony of the desert, not of Padua, but of the desert. And there was this Arian heresy, and the Archbishop of Alexandria didn't know how to answer it, because the predicament was that he was saying that God, the Son of God, is God or is a man. And he proved, and I've gone into this reason for the proof in this book. I'm not going to go into it here. It's intriguing, but it involves quite a lot of philosophical explanation to really give the truth of it. There was some truth in it. But if Jesus had been accepted as just a good philosopher and not the Son of God, people would have just taken his word as an opinion. They wouldn't have considered him a savior. Whereas in fact he was a great savior. And what he said had a power from God and not just good philosophy. But anyway, when he heard this Archbishop came to St. Anthony of the Desert and asked him if he could come and speak in their cathedral. And he explained what the problem was. And St. Anthony said, yes, he'd had a vision in which a donkey kicked over an altar, and he came. And he didn't give a long-winded talk. All he said was, when they began to have this big discussion in the church, half the people saying Son of God, other people said Son of Man, and so on, he got up and he said just 4 words. But he said them with such power that there was no further discussion. He said, I have seen him. That is the level from which our truth should speak. When we've experienced it, then we have a right to say it. And our job is to have that experience so we can share that experience. And when we have an experience of divine truth, then why not share it with people? Why be selfish? God wants you to share what you know. That's why he has children being born to parents, so they can share what they know. And whatever you know, share with other people. Don't keep it hoggishly to yourself. It's you're blessed by anything that you can channel, but the more you can channel that truth, the more you will find that you can change people's lives, and that's what it really should be. Art should be life-changing. If you look at the really great works of art, there's something about them. I remember when I first saw the Mona Lisa, I had seen many paintings of it, many copies of it, beautiful. But when I saw it in the Louvre, I was absolutely thrilled. There was a vibration there. What work you do as an artist, whether it be music, painting, whatever, put your vibration into it. When I met Master, he asked me how I liked his autobiography. Of course, I said it was wonderful. He said, that's because I put my vibrations into it. And I thought, vibrations? Far beyond my understanding. But I've come to understand that it's true. You can put your vibrations in what you do. Try to do so. This is why I think that although our mass-produced society today is a good thing, I hope someday we'll come back to handicrafts, where even people who make handicrafts understand that they can put their vibrations in it. There are some things, and my mother got a little cross, a wooden cross, that on Mount Athos, that was a Greek Orthodox monks. It's a very crudely made thing, but it was very precious to her, and it's precious to me. At Crystal Hermitage, I have it in the little display case of different art objects that I have there. And what's precious is that it was made by people with devotion. And you can feel that. A work of art will express who you are, far beneath or above or whatever, any form, color, sound. When you're writing music, I can talk more on this level than others because I've done that myself. But I feel, as Jyotish was saying in his talk yesterday, that you have to ask God, you have to say clearly what it is you want, then you have to feel, and it has to be the right vibration. There's a song I wrote, and it's an interesting thing because I took a lot of photographs of the Amalfi Coast, and I was supposed to give the service that morning. I did give the service that morning, but as I sat to meditate and prepare myself for the service, suddenly this song came into my mind that fitted those slides. And I found that within an hour, all the 9 songs of that sequence for slides came. And I had one of Capri, which was very happy. I had the next one was Pompeii, which had to have a certain amount of sorrow in it, because after all, that was a karmic destruction. But then I had to think clearly what I wanted with that, and I said, well, destruction, yes, but after all, that's 2,000 years ago. They've surely paid off their karma by now. So let's not make it too solemn and too unhappy. And I had different things I wanted clearly to say. Then I said, God, give me this melody. It just came. The next one was Napoli. I couldn't believe my eyes, but my ears, or my mind, or whatever. When you come from Napoli, la 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 la, life is long and joy is free, la 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. So that was the next song after Pompeii. Couldn't believe my ears, but there it was. It was a few slides of Naples, and that was sort of the mood, a tarantella. And you'll read very, very solemn statements that the tarantella was intended to sort of work off the poison from a tarantula bite. This is Italian sense of humor. I'm absolutely sure there's no truth to it at all. First of all, it's a very graceful dance. Secondly, well, never mind. But right after that, I had in my slide sequence, I had a monastery. But it wasn't an ordinary monastery. It was no longer a monastery. Now it's a place where tourists go. So I had to do something that was monastic, but not too monastic, because now it's no longer a monastery. And so the song, I just said clearly to God, I want something that sounds monastic, but is not too monastic, and I don't want it to finish. I want it to go off into infinity. Long I've called you, my Lord, long I've called you. This is strictly Gregorian chant style. Many years I have longed for your sight. Then the words and the feeling both came together. If it's going to be something modern, it's got to have a little bit more emotion into it. It can't be just the nostalgic longing for God of a Gregorian chant. It's a place where tourists go now. So I said, and long for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears. Now, no Gregorian chant would go up that note. It would say down below, bathe the darkness with tears of devotion. Then I had to repeat it so the listener doesn't know that it's a mistake. Offered candles in prayer to your light. Then, what does the mind want? If you're listening to modern music, you know what it wants. How much longer, friend? Well, I knew I couldn't do that. That you have to control it. You can't just run riot with emotion. You're in a monastery, for God's sake. So I held it in, and it's much more powerful for that. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? Isn't that beautiful? It's much more feeling, because it's controlled. I am yours, ever yours. Now, a song would normally end on the tonic. In fact, that's a rule, that a melody should end on the tonic, but you can't always. I am yours, ever yours, will you come? So I changed that to, I am yours, ever yours, will you come? Why don't we have some singers come up and sing that? Come on, Niram. Come on, Dharm. Uma, come on. Just a few of you. Yeah. Just so you can hear the song completely and properly. My voice is no longer what it once was.
Long I've called you, my Lord. Long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion. Offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come? Long I called you, my Lord. Long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion. Offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come?
Thank you. Now, I want you to understand what I mean when I say channeling. I had to work with that. I had to, first of all, have the inspiration that it should be what I said, but it wasn't all that conscious. The inspiration that came, I had to rein it in. You can't just be a passive receptacle. It's not like automatic writing. You allow the inspiration to come, and then you sort of work with it, you guide it, you flow with it. A marvelous example was that beautiful thing they played yesterday. It's called Life is the Quest for Joy, and as I said, if it were really the full title, it would be Life is, in spite of trials, disappointment, suffering, is the quest for joy. And I'd done that slideshow, Different Worlds. And it shows people from all over the world, different countries, different nationalities, different levels of society. And it shows how all of them are looking for something. But you see clearly through the whole thing, bit by bit, it becomes very clear that those who give of themselves, those who expand their sense of self-identity, are more fulfilled than those who grab for themselves. And that lesson becomes very clear as you see all of these slides. But I wanted a piece of music that would express the human condition with all its joys and disappointments, its successes and failures, its upliftment and depression, all the things that human beings go through. And it seemed like an absolutely impossible thing to get one melody that says all of that. So one day I sat at the piano and put my fingers on the keys, and asked God to give me a melody. Now, if I had just said, you give it to me and I won't do anything, the fingers wouldn't have moved. But as I felt, I let the fingers move with that feeling. And then what came out was that beautiful melody. And I think it does say just what I wanted it to say. At least it says it for me. This is what we must do with any inspiration we feel. We've got to be a part of it. You can't just blast out something and say, well, God told me to say it. I remember after a lecture in Hollywood Church, somebody said it was a wonderful talk. I said, well, God is the doer. And she said, oh, really? As if, well, I knew it was good. I didn't know it was that good. That's not what I mean. I mean that the more you allow, it won't be infallible until you're infallible. But the more you let him work through you and the more you work with that inspiration, the more you will become a clear channel for it. But be a true channel by trying to feel that inspiration. Well, I've talked longer than I intended to. I've got so much I could talk about. But the reason I came late was because we got a flat tire, and so we had to fix that first. So I've talked a compensating 10 minutes. Davy, you had a little something you were going to talk about.
We shared this with many of you who were here last week, but that wasn't everyone. This past May, Swamiji had a book launch in Rome for the Italian translation of the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. And it took place at one of the most prestigious halls in all of Rome. It's called the Campidoglio.
No, I'll say further, the most prestigious. In Italy.
Probably in Italy. And it's part of the both spiritual and civic center of all of Rome. And it's where we were told where coronations take place. It's part of the civic palace where the civic leaders of Rome live. And it was really an extraordinary event for many reasons. There were many dignitaries there. The ambassador from India to Italy was there with his wife, and they spoke. Our friend, Mr. Kartikayan from New Delhi, who is a very close friend of Swami's and of ours. He was the former head of the Indian FBI, if you can believe, but a very sweet and beautiful soul. And he spoke, and he said the city of Rome is honored to have such a soul as Swamiji here tonight. And the assistant to the mayor of Rome spoke, and many others. But during that evening, Swami was given a number of very high awards, and we wanted to just touch on them because he, as Swami said, he doesn't care himself for such awards, but for these awards really represent Master's teachings going out to the world and being recognized as one of the most important forces for human upliftment in the world today, as they surely are. This first award he received, it's called the Medal of Julius Caesar. You can't see it too well. Just, it's not, yeah, I will. It's hard to get out. This is the, it's a gold medal with the imprint of Julius Caesar on it. This is equivalent to the keys of the city of Rome. And this was presented to Swamiji by the head of cultural affairs in Rome itself, which is a very high position. And then he also received something called the Bridge Award. This was by a consortium of publishers. It's engraved in Italian. And both of these this will be in display in Italy. This I think Swami will take with him because they're both engraved in Italian. But we wanted to just, with this award came an explanation of what the award was, and we wanted to just read it to you because it's quite significant. Again, as Swami said, it's not, I consider myself unworthy of the awards, but I'm happy that they've been given because they honor Master's work. So this is what this is called, the Bridge Award, Ponte Prizze in Italian. And it's from a consortium of book publishers.
Yes, translation into English.
Yes, here's the translation. Swami Kriyananda is author of 90 books, 25 of which have been translated into Italian, and 400 pieces of music. He has dedicated his entire life and work to serving others, creating a bridge between philosophy and practicality, science and religion, teachers and students, parents and children, social commitments and inner well-being, East and West. Kriyananda is also the founder of 8 Ananda communities in the USA, Italy, and India, true cities of light based on the daily practice of inner peace and the high ideals of tolerance, solidarity, and universal brotherhood, a concrete example of multi-ethnic and multicultural bridges beyond outdated ideological, religious, and racial barriers. Kriyananda is a direct disciple of the great Indian yogi Paramhansa Yogananda, the spiritual master who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi and brought yoga to the West in the 1920s. Following his example, Kriyananda has spent 60 years promoting the principle of unity between East and West and has spread throughout the world the ancient principles of yoga and the spiritual teachings of the highest Indian tradition of self-realization, making them practical and at the same time available to people of every social level and applicable in every area of daily life. A beautiful honor.
Okay. Thank you all.